Ted Nugent is a rock star who is known for his crazy guitar riffs, electrifying shows, and personality that seems to be bigger than life. But behind the scenes, his story has another side that only his old friends know about. People who played with Nugent have a lot to say about his time with the Motor City Madman, from the early days of the Amboy Dukes to his run as a solo artist. What really took place? Behind closed doors, what kind of person was Nugent? Did the heat of his presence bring them together or push them apart? This video tells the stories and shocking truths that the musicians who used to play with him have never told anyone else. You might change everything you thought after hearing what they have to say. You knew about Ted Nugent. Don't miss this crazy ride, so stay tuned. Ted Nugent's iconic career. Over the years, Ted Nugent made a revolutionary effect that has lasted for more than 50 years. He deserves to be considered one of rock's all-time greats. People all over the world knew Ted Nugent for being a wild and talented rock guitarist. He made his first appearance on the charts in the 1960s, playing with the Amboy Dukes, a trippy rock band. Journey to the Center of the Mind was a big hit for the band, and Nugent did some amazing work on the guitar for it. However, the words were written by the band's keyboardist, Steve Farmer, and they were about using psychedelic drugs, which Nugent hated but was happy to help create these kinds of songs by the band. Still, that caused problems within the band, but Nugent's guitar playing was always the key to their successes, both during his career and in his personal work. It was back then, though, that the balance of musical skill and rebelliousness that would become his brand started to take shape. Ted Nugent reached new heights in rock music in the 1970s. His solo projects helped him become famous. His first record, which was called Steven, and hit songs like Stranglehold and Cat Scratch Fever, made him a guitar idol. It didn't take long for Nugent to become famous for his live shows, where he played loud, fast songs and was always full of energy. People would get used to him and his guitar solos. It was his unique style of music, a mix of hard rock and blues, and the way he lived his life, and especially his music, that set him apart from his peers and helped him gain many fans. Nugent has also been able to reinvent himself over the years without changing the sound that makes him famous. He became a part of the supergroup from the late 1980s to the early 1990s. They were in the rock band Damn Yankees with Jack Blades and Tommy Shaw. Their hit song High Enough is proof that Nugent could still rule the rock music business, even when alternative music was more popular. His rise in the music business followed this one path, which was the only one available to artists of the time: creative growth without deciding to change the very core of that they are heavy metal guitar shredders in this case. Along with his music, Nugent, who lives in a rural area, is known for taking strong political stands and doing even more controversial things than making music. He was still at odds with some of his fans, asking them to back him. You can hunt and use guns. His fans stuck with him, though, because he was always honest with them. Ted Nugent was and still is one of the most important people in rock music, even if there were scandals. His hard rock legacy inspires many young rock artists today. But as Ted's fame grew, the band slowly began to fall apart, and not everyone was happy about his fast rise to fame. In effect, the Amboy Dukes experienced Ted Nugent's first journey into rock multidimensional art was with the Amboy Dukes, which made him famous and was a big part of his formative years. When they formed in 1964, the Amboy Dukes were made up of players from Detroit's growing rock scene. Nugent played guitar for the band, lead singer, while other band members took turns singing lead. The band, the Amboy Dukes, was able to quickly transition from traditional rock music to hard rock by adding hard guitar riffs to their songs. Not only did Nugent play great guitar, But the band also added a creative touch that wasn't common at the time. This set them apart from other rock bands. They became famous all over the country in 1968 when their song Journey to the Center of the Mind became a hit. Because of how famous the song was, they became well known in the American rock music scene. Nugent's crazy guitar playing was a big part of the band's sound. The song's words were full of psychedelic images and talked about getting to know yourself better, but Nugent's music has always been known for its accuracy and high energy, powerful energy that went beyond the norms of the genre. The hit made the band even more famous and made sure that people knew Nugent was a rising star as a guitarist. When things began to get better, the Amboy Dukes started to have problems with himself because Nugent and the other band members were having artistic problems. Ted liked to take the lead, so he would often take over, if not fully control, the direction of the band's activities, which wasn't liked by everyone. He thought it would be more interesting to play up the tense sound of the guitars, but the rest of the band wanted to keep adding trippy sounds to their music. This made everyone in the band antsy and caused riffs that didn't seem like they would be fixed, which predicted the events that led to Nugent starting a big solo project. The Amboy Dukes were already breaking up in the early 1970s, and Nugent was ready to take charge and make music on his own. The end of the band's time together marked the beginning of a new period in Nugent's life. He was free from the restrictions of a band and ready to show that he is one of the best, if not the best, rock guitarist who plays by himself. Even though the Amboy Dukes, they only lasted a short time, but they left a mark on rock history that is still felt today. They were also the start of Ted Nugent's fiery career. The power of creativity, a one-man show? It became clear that Ted Nugent was in a band as his success went on. He was also in charge of the band. In his teens, he was in a band called the Amboy Dukes. Later, he went solo. Nugent was the main character, both on and off the stage. Because he had to be in charge of the creative part of the purpose all the time, there was less compromise and more conflict in his bands. A lot of his former bandmates, including him, talked about how he was like a tyrant. The man is in charge of everything, from writing to visualization, even though this kind of stubbornness is what leads to the relentless chase of. While it was a success, it made many of the stubborn people feel left out. Not only was the famous Ted Nugent the lead singer of the band, he also ran all of their meetings. Besides being in charge of the sound, he was also known to be in charge of the planning of tours, records, and events. Having this all-encompassing view of his music helped him see it as he had hoped, but it made his bandmates angry because they felt like they weren't being worth much. Many people said that working with Nugent was both fun and tiring. It was fun because Nugent was so smart, and it was tiring because he always wanted to be in charge. The question of creative power wasn't just about performing, it also came up when people were making songs. The band Nugent members would sometimes get into fights over loudspeakers. He may have written some of the worst guitar riffs in rock history, but the other band members who worked hard to make the Rasul a great group sometimes felt angry at him. Over time, some of them got angry that they couldn't work on songs together and said that their band could not grow because of it. Under Nugent's plan. But Nugent didn't feel bad about what he did. He said that his ideas were needed to protect the style of hard rock from the 1980s that made him famous. In the end, Ted Nugent's determination to do something unique paid off in two ways. On the plus side, it made sure that the press would talk about him and that his music would show him as a hard-rocking, free-spirited, no-nonsense personality without any egos. There were some bad effects, though. It turned off helpful people and caused some of his bands to break up. Still, despite the controversy, Nugent's band's unique musical vision continued to grow, and it was good for business yet effective management. Of the band had its price and ran them through a number of ex-band members who can tell them how it was to work under such strict rules. Persona on stage. The Wildman vs. The band. Ted Nugent's over-the-top stage persona has been one of the most important parts of his work for decades. The singer is known as the Motor City Madman because of how wild his music is and how fierce his voice is. Nugent was a man in real life, but when he was on stage, he might as well have been a wild rock and roll animal, because he would play the guitar so fast and crazy that it was hard to describe. In furs and holding a Gibson Birdland guitar, he was always in a hurry. Between the stage and the crowd, Nugent was the very definition of rock and roll excess. But his high-patterned stagecraft often put him at odds with, and sometimes even above, other band members who found it hard to match his overwhelming presence or even be in the same frame as him. Being the center of attention didn't bother Nugent, because he drew all eyes to himself when he was acting. But his command of the stage made it hard for the rest of the band to be heard. It's been. Some people who used to be in the band said the same thing. They always felt like they were in Ted's shade because he was so busy on stage that no one else had room. Due to his high energy, he would do things like throw himself into the crowd and do other possibly dangerous things. The crowd loved it, but his bandmates felt like extras in the Ted Nugent movie. The performance. All eyes were on Nugent the whole time, which wasn't fair to anyone else on stage and sometimes made things tense between some of them. It was also hard to tell the difference between music and performance arts because of how Nugent behaved on stage. His fans came to hear the thrilling guitar strokes he was famous for, and many others were drawn to the chaos and showmanship. Some of his efforts. This could make it hard for the group to work together musically, and Nugent might want to use the tension in the crowd in a more dramatic way. The other musicians often had to deal with Nugent's unpredictable style and behavior while playing, which made it harder for them to make the act flow together. Strategies used to help Nugent's solo work often went against what the band was doing as a whole. Even though he faced problems, Nugent's charisma as a singer was a big part of his success in the music business. His image as a crazy wildman won him a lot of fans who left wanting more and swearing there was no way he could live up to it. She wouldn't stay a rock star. His bandmates, on the other hand, found it hard to deal with his never-ending need for exclusive attention. There was a lot of media interest in him because of his over-the-top performances, but they also showed that the band was split up because the other artists were focused on the craziest punk figure in the group. Touring with Ted the Good, the Bad, and the Crazy. Traveling with Ted Nugent was an experience that I will never forget, and I have many memories of good and bad times. For most of Nugent's band members, being on the road with him meant performing in exciting, nerve-wracking, and high-energy shows almost every day. There were no dull times because Nugent kept insisting on, "I want to put on the best live shows ever." And the best part was the performance on stage in front of a packed house. Both on and off stage, his crazy attitude showed up. Most of the time, it was just as crazy. For people who were strong enough, the tours. Enjoying a lot of rock and roll, great music, and the fun of playing with one of the most entertaining acts there is. But it wasn't all sweetness and light. There were also bad things. Nugent was one of those people who kept going even after the lights went out on stage. When the band wasn't on stage, he needed the same level of commitment from them. Going on tours with Ted was mentally and he seemed to have endless energy, which was physically tiring in a number of ways. People in the band would often talk about how life on tour was like a never-ending cycle, where sleep seemed like a myth and every other day something unexpected would happen. But satire was a weapon that could be used when people were bored and the stress built up on its own, like when someone else's ideas for the show didn't work with his or when touring got too much. Besides being tired, there were real times when things went crazy. Especially if you thought that Nugent's performances or TV appearances were meant to hide his crazy behavior, you would be wrong. There are many stories about life on the road that are quite unbelievable. There were dangerous trips where you could meet people, party hard, and even go shooting in any place advertised with tendon, even outside of the country, which was really cheesy. Because he liked getting thrills, he put himself and his crew in dangerous situations where it was hard to balance fun and excitement with risk. Because of the young culture of risky behavior and punk hairstyles, these and many other things became part of the band's rock and roll history. However, he left most of his co-workers to clean up the mess he had made. Even with all the chaos, though, going on a trip with Ted Nugent was also a chance to learn about rock history. Sharing the stage with a famous rock star at the top of his game is an amazing experience, no matter how hard it is on the mind and body. Something that most artists would not trade for anything else. The band members worked together through the good and bad times of the trips, which also tested their endurance. These are the stories from the tours that have become part of Nugent's story and show not only his, as a wildman, but also the extreme highs and lows of being one of the meanest rock stars on tour. It looked like the crazy ride couldn't get any worse, but Nugent's tendency to speak his mind caused even more trouble off the stage. Nugent's controversial political views. Ted Nugent has been in the music business for a long time, and his music has been in the news. And has been in politics a lot. But his fans aren't like those of other artists. That's because of his political views, which have often caused a stir, not just in the music world, but also in other places. He is an avid shooter and supporter of traditional social norms. People have always known what Nugent thinks, and he has always said it with the same passion he uses when playing his guitar. Because he likes guns and all kinds of shooting, which many people don't like, he is known for having very strong opinions about the Second Amendment. And people who like him because of that kind of behavior know that there are. People who are rude or even cruel are drawn to people who are outspoken. Even though it's true that payback tastes best when it's cold, it's interesting to note that Ted was often very angry about politics. As with most of Nugent's ex-bandmates, his strong political involvement sometimes got in the way of getting along with them, especially when their views did not match up. Some of his fans might say that he deserves the freedom of speech that lets him say what he really thinks. But some band members were very upset that his political beliefs seemed to be mixing with their work as artists. Some band members felt like they were being held hostage by politics, and Nugent's drive to always stand up for what he believed in made some group members dislike him. People who used to work with him have told the press that there was stress in the camp when action became the main topic of talk about Nugent both inside and outside the camp. Over time, this difference became less clear for some people in the group. Not only did Nugent's involvement change his relationships with other musicians, it also changed how people saw him. Because of the specifics of his controversial comments, his unwavering support for a number of causes, such as gun rights and hunting, has turned off some of his fans. Nugent has made some outrageous comments about political figures and social problems over the years that have made him famous. These comments have been seen as pushing the limits. Because he was very set in his ways about things like immigration, gun control, and environmental control, which led to protests and boycotts. Even though the weather is bad, Nugent is still not sorry and doesn't seem to be changing his mind. Instead, he sticks to his beliefs and promotes them publicly. You can't separate Ted Nugent's political views from his work as a rock artist. Picture, for better or for worse. Nugent will always be remembered for his music in the history of rock and roll, but his political views have made him a very controversial person. For the same reason that all cultural heroes are loved and hated, Ted Nugent is deeply loved and hated. He has clear views that he shares without worrying about what might happen. He has strong political views that make him easy to like or dislike. However, his life story shows that he has always been willing to take risks and say what he thinks, no matter what. Financial disputes and power struggles in the business of rock throughout the history of rock and roll. Even disagreements over money and power have been seen as part of the music. Ted Nugent's life as a rock musician is no different. Running a rock band became harder as it became more well-known and wealthy. A huge business empire. Over the years, writers and music historians who worked closely with Ted have told stories about their time working for him. Most of them have talked about the common problem of disagreements over money. People knew Ted to be bossy and loud, so he was more involved in the business. This led to arguments over payment, fees, and contracts. Often the fight was over who should get credit for writing the songs and who should get the profits from them. Such an action. Nugent was the main force behind his music, so he was often seen as the main person responsible for what was going on. However, friends who helped make his songs sound good sometimes felt let down. Sharing the money made from record sales, tours, and merchandise became a point of contention, especially among former members who thought they should get more of the money, claiming that they were not paid enough. Some members said that the lack of clarity in financial plans led to power struggles among members, which made it impossible for them to live together and maybe even work together. It was clear that Ted Nugent was a strong-willed guy in all parts of his life, including his business life. Band members and friends often got into fights with Nugent as he took over. Talks, make plans for marketing, and distribute. This method kept the brand's image constant and stopped information from getting out. But it also turned people off, because they felt like they had worked hard and not been rewarded or recognized. Ted's strong need for control and his co-workers' never-ending desire for fairness created a toxic environment in which many people quit the deal because they didn't like the way power was distributed. Nugent's work life went well even though he had money problems and was involved in internal fighting. His business sense was a big part of this. His personal life with his bandmates may not have been perfect, but Nugent's ways of advertising himself and his tour. His ability to manage people and own a brand that makes money helped him stay in business in the field. Still, the people around him usually had to deal with the consequences of his success, as disagreements over money and power have led to many splits over the years. Besides, Nugent's business sense, which helped his career, also caused many of his relationships to fail. Why did it all fall apart? As Ted Nugent's success grew, problems with his bands caused some members to leave, only to come back after some time, leaving the other band members feeling different emotions. A lot of Nugent's project partners felt the strain. Linked to Nugent's big attitude both on and off stage. There were times when Nugent's need to be in charge and his aggressive behavior made it hard for other band members to get along. They felt like they weren't important or respected. In the end, these points of view led to unrest in the band, as several members quit because of personal or financial problems. Or just the trouble it's to deal with someone who is so tough. One of the main things that led to these breakups was a lack of creative power. Nugent, who was known for having a rich mind and using the guitar a lot in his music, would often give himself some leeway in the way his music is played. While his stubbornness helped make his sound unique, it made it hard for his bandmates to work together professionally, especially if they wanted to or felt like they weren't fully recognized. Lots of people, on the other hand, thought this was useless, and in the end, many decided to leave Nugent's circle rather than stay. In the end, most band members left for long periods of time because they didn't agree with Nugent's style of music, ran into money problems, or liked being around him too much. At the same time, Ted Nugent did very well as a single artist, but the people who worked with him for a short time did very well. Make sacrifices because of his success. Some people who worked hard to be on the same stage as him were very unhappy with how unfair it was and how little attention they were given. In the end, most of the splits were caused by Ted Nugent's stubbornness, which made him famous as a rock star but also hard to deal with. What they admire the positive reflections of their bandmates. Working with Ted Nugent was often tough and conflictual, but many of his former bandmates have said nice things about how hard he worked, how talented he was, and how much he loved music. One of the most admired things about Nugent's job was how dedicated he was to his work. Bandmates would often talk about how determined he was to get better. They play the guitar beautifully and put on a great show every night. Nugent made sure that the people who worked with him got better at what they did, whether it was hours of practice or going on stage. His skill with the guitar is another thing that his old bandmates often praise. He made a lasting impact in the rock genre with his ability to come up with catchy riffs and his skill at playing the guitar. Also, these are the people who had the. This is in disagreement with Nugent, who agreed that working with such a mind was fun and helpful. The rest of the band was able to be a part of something much bigger than revolutionary because he wasn't afraid of anything. In addition to his singing skills, Nugent was often admired for his need to lead and drive. His strict teacher. Some of his bandmates found his approaches most of the time rude, but others admired his willingness to be in charge and decide how things should be done, especially when it came to the music and the shows, so that his message was always clear. His dedication to the craft, whether it was dealing with the logistics of traveling or putting together his art, was strong. She worked hard and was admired by her coworkers, even those who didn't do the same thing she did. This is the last thing some of Ted Nugent's bandmates say that he helped them professionally in some way. That is, the addition of fame wasn't for nothing. Because some people got the chance to be well known. Many of his fellow artists were able to break through because of Ted Nugent. It wasn't easy, but it's hard to think that any of them would have refused. They had to be a part of her singing story because it would affect their own music careers in some way. Even though there were problems and disagreements, the last part brings everything full circle and shows how close the relationships with Nugent really are. Where are they now that I look back? The Ted Nugents. Over the years, ex-bandmates have all gone their separate ways, making their own way in the music business and other fields as well. There were a lot of people who kept playing, either by themselves or in new bands. Others looked for other artistic or professional opportunities. The time they spent working with Nugent, even though it was sometimes rough, helped their jobs. Even though it was hard, most of them remember their time with the City Madman as something special. It was an exclusive that helped me learn and grow. A lot of Nugent's old bandmates, especially those from the beginning of his time with the Amboy Dukes, have been seen around in the music scene lately. At that time, the guitarists, drummers, and bass players left Nugent to join other rock bands or go solo, where they could freely express their artistic ideas without being controlled by him. A few have disappeared from public view completely. Instead, he was busy producing music, writing songs, or showing young performers how to do their jobs, which they did with Nugent's help. Some of Nugent's former bandmates, especially those from his Damn Yankees quintet, have become well known in the rock world. People like Jack Blades and Tommy Shaw have also. They had great runs with their bands and other projects, which kept their fans all over the world entertained. Because these artists were already famous before they joined forces, they were able to use their time in Damn Yankees to keep their gourd that of being rock stars. As if that wasn't enough, the friendship and respect they had for Nugent made them even stronger. Another exciting part of their long and successful lives. So that's it. If you liked learning about these rock stars, please click the like button and let us know what you think. Also, don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth looks into the world of music. Hey, stay tuned. Click on this next movie to see more untold stories in rock and roll history. Thanks for seeing.